Good afternoon and welcome to a regular City Council workshop for the City of Oak Harbor. It is 2 p.m. in the afternoon. Today's date is March 24th, 2021. I'd like to call this workshop meeting to order. Due to COVID-19, there is no physical meeting location per Washington Proclamation 20-28. Today's meeting may be viewed live via YouTube and replayed on cable channel 10. In addition, the public may call 623-404-9000 and enter the meeting ID number, and that number is 149-766-1467 to listen to the meeting live. This is for audio only. Public comments are not usually taken at workshops. Council members and city staff are participating via teleconference. The staff sitting in council chambers are all physically distanced at least 6 feet apart and will be wearing masks when they are not speaking. Guests that are included in staff presentations will be excused from the Ring Central meeting at the conclusion of the agenda item as appropriate. Since we do have one action item today, I'll ask our city clerk, Julie Lindsay, to call the roll.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor Pro Tem Munns.
Here.
Councilmember Heisen.
Present.
Councilmember Mack.
Present.
Councilmember Servadius.
Present.
Councilmember Goebel.
Present.
Councilmember Wiesner. Councilmember Wiesner is in the waiting room and is coming in. While we're waiting for him, Mayor, I will let you know that Councilmember Wassinger will not be joining us today.
Okay.
And Councilmember Wiesner, can you hear us now?
Yes.
All right, I'm
Okay.
calling the roll, and he is in, Mayor. So,
Thank you, Ms. Lindsay. We'll go on to several items on our agenda, but our first item today is actually a consent agenda action item, professional services agreement, Pacific Construction Consultants, and that will be approved unless there's any questions about that. That'll be approved as presented. Okay, we'll move on then to communications. And today, Harbor Heights Sports Complex Concepts Communication and IT Manager Sabrina Combs. Sabrina is presenting because our former Parks Manager Jesse Ott recently left the city to pursue other opportunities closer to family. I want to thank our team for continuing to work on this project with David Evans and Associates, and that team includes Alex Warner, Kat Kamak, Talman Huckey, and John Simrow. So thanks to them, and I'll turn it over to Sabrina.
Thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon, City Council and Mayor. I am going to present on the Harbor Heights Sports Complex Master Plan concept options. So first, the master plan is a multi-phase project. Phase 1 is constructing 2 soccer fields and 50 parking spaces. This is funded through a grant from the Recreation Conservation Office. That grant and all of the items related to that grant must be completed by December 31st, 2022. The construction is currently scheduled to occur between February 2022 and August 2022. Additional items listed in the concept plans will take place after that construction, and those are future items, but we did do the master plans in advance. So the project details right now are that we received the Recreation Conservation Office grant. The Development Services Department has been working to modify the use of the land, which is 75 acres for the sports complex. We also hired David Evans and Associates to provide consultant work to create the master plans. David Evans and Associates, as well as staff, met with community sports teams and clubs to talk about what the needs were. Then they drafted 5 concepts for staff review. At the same time, we also conducted some community surveys out to the public. We received 293 responses. And then staff worked looking at those first 5 concepts to reduce them down to 2 for community feedback. Then we provided a virtual open house with printed and electronic brochures, a video, and received 44 responses. We did modify to a virtual open house because of COVID regulations and restrictions, and we wanted to make it available. The printed brochures were available at city offices as well. Then we presented the concepts to the park board for recommendation. So master plan concept 1, this is a look at it. As you can see, there's a play bike area at the top. This area also near the wetland could be used for disc golf course as well. We also have the softball, little league fields, baseball fields, some soccer fields here. You can see the phase 1 option 1 or phase 1 option 2, depending on how people preferred. Then we have the multi-use fields and some additional soccer fields. In the middle of the complex, you'll see where there are restrooms and a concession stand as well, and then a maintenance area. For these concepts, again, we have to remember that the first phase is under the grant agreement, which includes 2 soccer fields, and the 2 soccer fields include 50 parking spaces. So with that, we want to make sure that we were showing the community and you what that would look like with just those soccer field options. So this is concept 1, phase 1, with Gun Club Road access, or we have Elwha Street. Then for master plan concept 2, the second option, this option shows parking here with the wetland area where we could have the bike area and disc golf course. It also has the little league field, softball fields, restroom and concessions, baseball, a larger parking lot here, multi-use fields 1 and 2, soccer fields 3 and 4, then soccer field 1 and 2 with some parking above it, and soccer fields 5 and 6 with additional parking. Again, here is what it would look like with just one of the choices for just the soccer fields with the parking. So community responses and recommendations, 44 responses in favor of master plan concept 2 with phase 1 soccer fields and street access from Gun Club Road. The park board recommendation was the same. They had some additional amenities they wanted to ask for with some changes. And then from a staff perspective, we see some pros and cons with both options. We also want to take some consideration for the additional steps that will need to take place for the Gun Club Road access. So to talk about that in a little more detail, we're calling these staff considerations because we want to talk about the specifics of the 2 access points. So with Gun Club Road, once we get the traffic study back, we'd have more detail about what specifically the impact would be. There are additional costs for widening the road that would be required with this access. Additionally, we'd have to do some permitting. One option is to pursue Gun Club Road with Elwha as a backup. So we do want to make you aware of that as well. Elwha Street is the other option. The concern we had from community members is that that road already has community members living on it. It also has a lot of parking that's being utilized. And so there are concerns about adding more activity on that access point. So the city can focus on if the city could focus on the soccer field selection with parking first, we can always work with David Evans and Associate on doing additional work around future master planning. What staff is being really aware of at this point is some of the critical deadlines that we need to pay attention to. Oak Harbor School District is doing construction on the school and Fort Nugent, and that will have impacts to available sports fields in the future. We're not sure what those specific impacts will be, but we know that some more impacts are coming. The RCO grant deadline, as I talked about at the beginning of this presentation, is December 31st, 2022. And then we are moving forward with the permitting process, and we know that that would take 8 to 10 months to complete. And then lastly, what we'd like to do is, based on discussions tonight, come back to council on April 6th with a resolution for the selected concept. So with that, we are seeking council's direction on which of the options they prefer. And I've just listed the different options here. And so what I'm going to do is just move on and then say that thank you to all of you for taking the time to hear this presentation tonight. And since we are talking about two concepts, what I want to do is just refer back to what those two concepts look like for discussion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sabrina. So we'll turn to council. And I see a hand up from Councillor Heisen.
Thank you, Mayor. Sabrina, I don't know if you or Mr. Evans could answer this, but I'm noticing on both concepts, I don't see an option for any basketball courts, and it looks like that received quite a bit of votes. I was just curious, was there a cutoff in terms of voting, or was there just not a place for it?
When we looked at the feedback we received from the community, we also grouped that with the needs we have with loss of fields, in addition to other amenities we have at other parks. So there was a combination of things that were evaluated for that. David Evans and Associates, do you guys have any other things to add to that?
I'll jump in. This is Jim Henke with David Evans and Associates. I'm a landscape architect, and John Smith is with us. We're trying to shape a vision of the future, but also clarify the first step of phase one. So, basketball courts, if there's a continued interest from the community in them, it's my understanding that the master plan could be updated to reflect changing needs, perhaps. But for this exercise, we tried to work with a sports field program primarily. So that I'd just like to add that's, there's flexibility looking ahead. This exercise didn't focus on basketball. It was mostly soccer and other ball fields.
The other thing that I'd like to add to that, thank you, Jim, is we were also looking at sports tourism as part of the focus. So with that in mind, knowing that there were sports tourism opportunities amongst Little League, softball, baseball, soccer, and some additional sports that might come up in the future for the multi-use fields.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, definitely softball and soccer. Yeah, for sure. We'll bring the people in. My comment in terms of which option to start with in terms of entry, I personally would lean towards the Elwha entrance, just because it would be closer and the entrance to the new park would be part of a neighborhood, as opposed to someone kind of going out of their way in a pretty circuitous route to get there. But I also understand the concerns of the people in the neighborhood for that reason. So as much as I like the access being part of a neighborhood, I understand those concerns as well. So I guess we can just wait and see how those options come out in the wash. This is really thorough. Thank you very much for all the work you did on this. It's great.
Thank you, Councillor Heisen. Councillor Goebel.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question. I have two questions. My first one, I was curious if our fire department or EMS had any sort of preference to the two options that are being presented. I don't know if Chief Merrill's on here, but I was curious if they had a preference.
That's a great question.
Are they on here?
And
This is Mike Buxton. I'm in for Ray today.
Oh,
I've been
hi.
following the project. Right now, we're just trying to kind of see what the options are. We haven't really given our input.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
I I'd probably have more concerns about LWA, but I know if we don't get this process going, we may lose the grant money. So
Okay.
we'll just kind of go from there.
Yeah, that's good to know. I just wanted to make sure you guys felt like whatever, if there was an option that felt that it was better for you guys to have access to the facility with construction and potential liabilities and stuff. So I was curious. And then
Go ahead.
no, you go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, you know, we don't go on a lot of calls out to Fort Nugent. There really aren't any buildings in here. Once in a while, maybe a kid will get hurt, but
right.
that'd be like a WB unit. That'd be the hospital ambulance going out there looking at a concussion or something like that. So it's really pretty low impact for the fire department.
Gotcha. All right. And then my other question, this is not totally related to the phase 1 and phase 2, but I was curious if this park, this complex will be lit, if it will have lighting in the evening, if sports can play in the evening.
So that was one of the future discussion items that we had. Jim or John, do you want to add anything more to that?
I'll just jump in, and my understanding is lighting is intended.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's my understanding at this point. And John, I don't know if you had
it has a little bit to do with funding. I mean, a lot of these things, such as lights and restrooms and even the access, have a little bit to do with the money that's been allocated. What can we get the most out of? What are the highest priorities? I say ultimately we heard that lighting for the master planning was desirable, and so we would assume it would be lit at some point, not necessarily phase 1 though.
Gotcha. Okay, yeah, those were my 2 questions. Thank you both for answering those.
You're welcome.
Mayor Pro Tem Munz.
Thank you, Mayor. Eventually, I mean, we're talking about doing one entrance at the beginning, but wouldn't we end up, because if you have a tournament, you would need, I would suspect, 2 entrances. So using both streets, or am I wrong on that?
You are absolutely correct. So we will have multiple access points, and eventually you even see an east-west road planned there at the 16th corridor, which is the south end of the park. So yeah, as this builds out and becomes, you know, over 1,000 or around 1,000 parking stalls in a big event, it's going to need multiple access points.
Okay. So I think just because it's not as busy right now, I like the Gun Club Road entrance to be done first. So just on that part. I also noticed that there is one bus stop, but it's only on the one side of Eli. Is it possible to talk to Island Transit to see if they could do a bus stop on Gun Club Road? It's somebody thought about that, so that we've got bus service if Gun Club Road ends up being our first entrance built? That's a question.
Mayor Pro Tem, I don't see a problem with that. We can add that to the list. We also have a list of additional items from the park board as well that we are compiling.
Okay, and I would assume if we can't afford the lit fields at the beginning, that when they are doing foundations or tearing up all the stuff, that they would lay conduits so that it would be easy to thread and do the lighting and needed electricity for speaker system, cameras, you know, things like that. I would assume, right, that they would lay all that stuff in when they can, but maybe not have the money to string it, but at least they would have the conduits in for the anticipated.
I think for all things that we think might go in the future. We need to consider them as we do phase one, wherever it ends
Okay.
up being. So.
Okay. And I really like the option one looks pretty straightforward, up and down lines and stuff. I really like how things were spaced a little differently in option two with the parking, with some curves kind of in there and stuff. I just think aesthetically, we want this to be a showcase, a gym besides Windjammer, which is, but I like the layout of how you've done the parking and how to get around and stuff like that. I like option two better. And that's it on my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Councilor Servadius.
So having sat in on the park board meeting, I'm going to basically concur with their selection, which was concept two and developing the northernmost, the pink soccer fields. I don't know if it's any easier coming in from Gun Club. I'm looking at Google Maps here. LY did drive over there. I've driven over there in the past because I know we had some problems with transients going up through there and into the woods. I don't know if either, actually I'll phrase it this way. I guess I want to give the folks on Elwha Street a chance to get used to what's coming. You should always know when your street just dead ends, that at some point it will continue through, whether it's to another residence or a park or whatever. In this case, it'll eventually be a park. So I think Gun Club Road would probably ease that introduction to that whole area because there's not a lot right there on Gun Club Road. One of the other things that came up was parking. And when I look at this concept two, the grant pays for 2 fields and 50 spaces. Hopefully, if we develop that, it's labeled parking 5. And I don't know if anyone can answer the southernmost number of spots that are in that pink area. About how many parking spots would that be? 50-ish or not quite?
There's, I'll just jump in.
Okay.
There's, we tried to capture within that pink rectangle, I think there's over 50.
Okay.
So yeah, it's just a piece of that parking lot would meet the 50 stall requirement.
And the other thing that I know Sabrina will have there, or it's in the notes from the park board meeting then, was just trying to, even if it's a field, we've all been down to the farmer's market at Coopville or somewhere where you can just park on a grass field. It's not necessarily striped, but I would hope that we could flatten out or maybe even throw some gravel down for overflow parking until we truly develop it at a minimal cost. If we decide or we realize very quickly that we need more than 50 spots, I think we will. If you've been over to Fort Nugent, you'll know that when there's a tournament going on, the parking lot's full, they're lined up going down Fort Nugent Road. Sometimes they'll park across the street in the neighborhood. So I think very quickly, even if it's not truly developed, having some grass or a graveled area, which would probably be the northern section of parking lot 5 there, that could just be overflow parking, will be fairly critical. But that would be my thoughts of which version I would prefer as concept 2, with the first phase being those northern 2 fields. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Mack.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Sabrina, for that presentation, and thank you, Council, for all your great input there. And with that said, Councilmember Servadius answered some of my questions there with the parking. I would be in favor of that phase 2. I like the parking arrangement, and yes, even if it is developed to a minimal, you got to have some gravel area, something that's not muddy. Where there are people going in and out. Yes, I'm concerned about the lighting. As Councilmember Goebel mentioned, even at the first start of it, we've got to have something up there for at least basic security over some of the parking. Could be anywhere from 1 to 3 lamps, that type of thing. I do have a concern on the widening of Gun Club Road. Sabrina, maybe you can help me out with that. It's going to be an extra expense. Do we have an actual number and who is going to be actually responsible for footing the bill on that widening project?
I'm going to let Alex Warner speak to that because he's been working on that information. So Alex, would you mind taking that?
Yeah, I can do that. We've had preliminary discussion with Island County on that item. They suggest that we widen the road from our water tower gate to the park property to 26 feet wide. It's currently about 14 feet wide. And the existing road there is a pervious asphalt. I believe we would do the same. I don't have a cost estimate worked up for that right now. It would just be a rough number to provide at this time. And I believe that would be the responsibility of the city in developing the park to pay for that widening of the street.
Okay, and is this, would this be required? Would we have to do this and spend that money before we can allow any use of the park in late 2022?
That is my understanding, and that would, entail more conversations with Island County. And I believe there's also a permitting process since that is a county road. So we would need to coordinate with them and see what that may entail.
So are they aware of the deadline that we're working with the grant and all of that? Is everybody on the same page there, Mr. Warner?
I'm not certain if they have been. I'm speaking to this from a few employees that are no longer with the city. So I need to pick up that conversation and continue it, and see what they understand with what we intend with this park.
Okay, all right, appreciate it. That would be good if we could follow up, and so we're kind of on the same wavelength. Your exit and entrance, that's going to be a major issue there, and getting people to and from. So, okay, that's it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilor Heisen.
Thank you, Mayor. Sabrina, you said that you were compiling, you and the park board were compiling a list. As long as we're compiling a wish list, I definitely want to emphasize the need for lighting. I think being able to have events in the evening will really expand our ability to host tournaments and things and get some more people in here. And also, as long as we're dreaming, I would like us to seriously consider additional restroom space. If we have 1,000 parking spaces and one restroom building, from what it looks like to me, I think that's something we need to prioritize and keep in mind, as we're putting in utilities and making the roads and all of that. So,
yes, thank you, Councilor Heisen. That was actually brought up by the park board. And I believe in the agenda bill, I listed just a quick list of some of those areas that they had talked about that we are adding to that list. So we are aware of that. And they did notice the difference in bathrooms between one master plan concept and the other. So.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, looks like that concludes the input and questions. Thank you very much, Sabrina and Council. We will then move on to the next item, which is Shoreline Master Program. Senior Planner Dennis LaFeber is with us for this presentation. Dennis?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Good afternoon. I want to take this opportunity and just keep you updated as to the progress of our Shoreline Master Program periodic review. We're starting to see some things happen. As you know, we're coordinating with the Department of Ecology on this effort. And we've opened the required 30-day comment window. The public comment window opened March 1st. It will close March 31st. Ecology has also required a public hearing, which we held with the Planning Commission last night. We did not receive any public comments on this draft. The SEPA document, the determination of non-significance, has been issued. We've got a 14-day comment window for that document. That'll also close on March 31st. The next step after the public comment period closes is to prepare written responses to any comments that we do receive, put together a package that we'll send off to the Department of Ecology. They will review it through probably the most of April and issue a determination of consistency, along with potentially some revisions that we'll have to discuss with Planning Commission and City Council. And hopefully we'll get that determination of consistency by the end of April, and then we'll start our local adoption process. Again, we'll have a public hearing with the Planning Commission and then take it forward to the City Council for your review and adoption also. So that's an update on the master program itself. On another note, we are having a neighborhood meeting for the Residential Bluff Conservancy area that we had our Coastal Geologic Services consultants take a look at. Their study has been completed, and we thought it would be a good move to invite the neighborhood to sit in on a virtual call with the consultants and answer any questions that they may have regarding some of the issues that have arisen over the recent years in that area. We do have a link to the meeting. It is on our webpage, oakharbor.org. It's under Development Services Department, and it's on the left side of the page. You scroll down a little bit, it's on upcoming events. That will provide the link to this meeting that is tomorrow afternoon, 3:30 to 5 o'clock p.m. Other than that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have on the draft that you have in your hands, the supplementary documents, or any upcoming events that you have any questions on.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lefebvre. See if council has any questions. It doesn't look like it. So you must have covered them all. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Council.
We'll move on then to our next item, which is Resolution 21-12, auction of an abandoned vessel due to non-payment of marina charges. Have our Harbor Master, Chris Sublett. Chris?
Hello, Mayor, City Council members. I'm here today to talk to you about auctioning off a vessel that was left in our marina, and the person has not made any payments on it. This is something that you'll see on the April 6th consent agenda as well. So the owner of this vessel has not made any payments, and the account is now past due. We've sent them the proper letters and notices and haven't received any response. Through this process, at a certain point, we did secure the vessel to the dock. And now at this point, we're considering the boat to be abandoned. This is the actual boat in the picture here, this blue one. We have followed RCW 53.08.320 and Oak Harbor Municipal Codes. These authorize the city to secure the vessel for non-payment of charges, and following proper notice to the owner, 90 additional days without payment, and subsequent city council action, the marina is authorized to conduct a sale of these vessels to recover our costs. Again, Oak Harbor Municipal Code, after securing the vessel, waiting 90 days, we can move to the next step. That 90-day period has passed. Here's another picture of the boat as well. So the next step is to gain city council authorization for the harbor master to auction the vessel at a public auction. And again, this will be on the April 6th city council meeting consent agenda. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, we'll turn to the council. I'll have to say it's nice to see we've got one that's still floating.
Yes, it is floating, but keep your fingers crossed.
Okay, it doesn't look like, I'm sure they're getting there ready for bidding. So it doesn't look like we have any questions. Thank you, Chris. Nice presentation there. We'll move on to our next item, which is general obligation bonds discussion. And we have our finance director, David Goldman. Mr. Goldman?
All right, good afternoon, City Council, Mayor, David Goldman, Finance Director. So this discussion item will be about a particular general obligation bond. Next slide. We probably could have combined this to Chris's presentation too, because it deals with the MARINA. Back about 10 years ago, the city took out a limited tax general obligation bond in the amount of $2.57 million for dredging the harbor for the MARINA. The current balance of that bond is $1.48 million, and the true interest cost is right around 4%. This bond is callable on June 1st, 2021, which is within about 75 days away. It's within the 90-day window of June 1st, so based on the laws, we can actually start the escrow and potentially lock in the rates prior to June 1st, 2021. And the interest rates now are significantly better than the 4%. They're floating around. They've gone up pretty dramatically over the past 3 weeks, but they're still lower than that 4%. So reading through the debt policy, it requires that the city procure professional services to execute finance transactions. The two professional areas of professional service related to bonds really center on a bond counsel and a financial advisor, and city council approval is required. The previous contracts for both those professionals expired back in 2018. Now the bond counsel is required for the issuance of all debt and to ensure that the city meets all federal, state, and local legal requirements. The financial advisor recommends the most advantageous method of issuing debt for the city and also helps place the debt. Now, the debt policy recommends but does not require that the selection of those consultants be done through a RFP or a request for proposals type process. It's up to the city council whether they want to follow that suggestion or, due to the current interest rate environment, want to just go ahead and utilize the folks that we used for the last bond issue. So we presented these two options here for the city council to consider. Option one would be to go ahead and do an RFP. That would follow the recommendations in the city's debt policy. The con for that would be it's more time consuming and interest rates may rise in the meantime. Option two would be to bring on the previous financial advisor and bond counsel. The pro for that would be quicker, and it would be able to take quicker advantage of the currently low interest rates. The con would be that it, does not follow the recommendation of the city's debt policy. So with that, staff is available to field any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Goldman.
And what we're really looking for, sorry to finish up here, but
go ahead.
We're kind of looking for council's kind of direction in which way they want to move forward with these two different options. If they move forward with option one, we'll go ahead and put an RFP together and put that out to the street and evaluate the proposers. If we go with option two, we can bring agreements with the previous financial advisor and bond counsel to the next city council meeting, and we could also have them present for for the council to ask them questions if that's the will of the council.
Okay. We'll turn to council. We've got Councilor Mack.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation there, Mr. Goldman. And yes, you're wanting the council to decide here, but I'd like to ask you, sir, what is your opinion and recommendation at this point, whether be the interest rates or our current financial obligations? What would you recommend that we do at this time, sir?
Well, if I knew where the interest rates were going to be in the future, I wouldn't be working here. I would be probably working on Wall Street. Well, I mean, we took a look at the interest rates about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and there's some items in the debt policy that require us to have a minimum of a net present value savings of 5%. And based on the interest rates we saw 3 or 4 weeks ago, we were over 5%. Things were, looking pretty good as far as saving. It looked like it was going to save about $10,000 to $12,000 every year on refinancing that debt. But, things did change over the past 3 weeks. and they keep fluctuating. They're down today as compared to last week, so it's hard to say where they're going to be in the future. You know, on the one hand, I mean, I'm agnostic either way the council wants to go on this. I mean, on the one hand, if we were happy with our previous financial advisor or bond counsel, and the city council was happy with them, you know, we can just kind of go ahead and negotiate with them and bring agreements and kind of continue on with their services. But on the other hand, if we go with, you know, we follow the recommendation of the city's debt policy, we're also going to have people bidding. We can see what the other rates are going to be for the, you know, the other folks, you know, who do these services. What I've seen over the years is generally they tend to all kind of be around the same, they kind of tend to charge around the same fee and the same rate structure. But, you know, if we do an RFP, we can definitely see what's out there. So it's really just weighing the pros and the cons and deciding what's in the best interest of the city.
When you say time consuming, are we talking days, or are we talking weeks, or are we talking months?
It'll probably take at least 4 weeks, probably a little bit longer, because we have to advertise it. We have to put it out there on the street. We have to give some time for people to put their proposals together. Then we have to get them in and review them. You know, they typically take, I'd say it's going to be over 4 weeks. It's probably going to be closer to 6 weeks, but I think Sandra probably will be able to weigh in a little bit better on that, because she's done a lot of procurements here, at, you know, for the city.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Councilor Mack. Councilor Servadius.
Thank you. Mr. Goldman, when we refinance, if we were to refinance, is it merely the rate, or can we also refinance the term of the bonds?
We can do both. I mean, we can look into that. I mean, if you look in the debt policy, the number one thing that the debt policy is focused in on is the savings. Like, what is the net present value savings over the remaining life of the bonds? But we can take a look at the terms too, if there's some terms we want to change on whatever we end up refinancing.
I was just curious. I mean, I understand and appreciate the need for both the bond counsel. Obviously, you need a broker or financial advisor to place the bonds. It's not really, I don't know what we've traditionally paid these people to do an analysis. It's not rocket science. And I've got an HP 10B2 here. I can start punching some numbers in. So hopefully it's, you know, they can provide an analysis of a couple of options that we as the council could look at and then make an informed decision. It seems like, though, if you've got to swing from 4-ish down to 2.5, 2 3/4-ish, that, yeah, it probably makes sense. And you mentioned 11 to 12,000 a year. It all adds up, especially for an enterprise fund. It adds up for any fund.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I would absolutely support. I imagine the math is going to work out. I just don't want to be, or I don't want to have, you know, $10,000, $12,000 a year absorbed by a $30,000 or $40,000 bill, you know, from a bond company doing a detailed analysis. I mean, I can't imagine it would be very expensive, but I don't know. I'd want to know that before we gave them the green light. That's all. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Councilor Servadius. Councilor Wiesner.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I guess I would be concerned about the cost of that versus the cost savings. What's it going to cost us? Do you have any idea, David, about what it's going to cost to bring on a financial advisor and bond counsel?
Well, they charge based on they charge a percentage based on the amount of the debt. So I'm just going to look at the previous agreement that the city, do you all have that up on your screen, this agreement, or you still see
We can see that now, yeah.
Okay, good. So this is what this is the previous agreement. This is the name of the financial advisors, PFM, and this is their hourly rates. But when it comes down to bonds, this is their fee for issuing a bond. But to refund a bond, it's usually less. It's usually about half. But that'll be a question. If the council gives us direction to go with the previous folks, we can ask them those questions at the next meeting. We can have them available to answer questions like this at the next meeting. Or I could just ask them in the meantime and provide the council, you know, a response. But yeah, this is the.
Would it be a reasonable assumption to think, since they had gone through this process with us before, that there might be a savings with dealing with them, that they don't have to reinvent the wheel?
That's something that we'd have to ask them. We would definitely have to ask them. This bond issues from 2011. This financial advisor PFM, I'm not sure if they worked on that bond issue, but they definitely worked on the bond issue for the clean water facility. And as far as the council, the bond council, they definitely worked on both. I saw their names on both. So we have worked with the bond council for over 10 years. And they have also a rate structure, different amounts, but they have a similar rate structure where they charge a minimum and they have a dollar amount per, per how much the debt is. But it's also reduced depending on, if it's a new issue, these are the rates. If it's reduced, if it's a refinance or a refunding, or if it's paid off.
Well, yeah, I guess those would be the two ultimate questions I would have is, I mean, what kind of money are we talking about for refunding these? If it's going to save us $10,000 to $12,000 a year, how does that work out? I mean, does it take us, 10 years to get that money back? And whether or not the previous bonding company feels as though they would have a different rate for refunding a bond that they initially issued versus typically having a rate structure that they charge, for refunding a bond that they didn't initially issue, I guess. And the reason I'm thinking this way, I mean, when it comes to the financials, you're absolutely right. We if we had a crystal ball and knew what was going to happen with the interest rates, we'd all be working on Wall Street. But when it comes to saving money, I'm a firm believer of time is of the essence. When it comes to spending money, I'm a firm believer of, hey, we need to slow down and look before that money leaves our hands. And that's just the way I am. And I am concerned about, the Treasury yield. I mean, the Treasury yield is what's going to drive the interest rates as the Treasury needs to sell off more bonds to curve off inflation because they can't print any more money. That's going to drive up interest rates. That's the way the markets work. And as we see inflation starting to poke its little head on a national level, we have to start thinking about how those guys are going to react to it and whether or not they're going to be releasing more bonds at a higher rate to help mitigate some of that. Certainly the Fed has said no raise in federal rate, right, through 2023, I think is what the Treasury Secretary or the Fed Secretary has indicated now. And of course, he's doing that to try and calm that inflation, right? With all those factors, I mean, it doesn't take a real big crystal ball to probably think that inflation's probably going to poke its head and we're going to see a raise in Treasury bond yields, which is going to raise interest rates. And it's just a matter of when that's going to happen, whether it's 4 months from now or next week. So I think I'd like the answer to those two questions before, I gave an indication which way. I mean, naturally, my first thought is, we go out for bid. That's the right way to do it. We make sure that we're getting the right price. But then when we're dealing with, financial markets and uncertainties, and we have an opportunity to save money, sometimes that would be the wrong answer. So that's my 2 cents.
All right, you got it.
Councilor Heisen.
Thank you, Mayor. David, I'm leaning towards going with what we've already got. Putting out for a proposal is going to cost money and it's going to take time. And if we want to take advantage of the low interest rates right now, I would be my personal preference to just move on it right away and go to our guys and see what they can do for us. So for whatever it's worth, that's my opinion.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Eisen. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. David, I think if 2 different times we've gone through the vetting process with the RFPs and we've chosen the same bond company that we feel like, it seems like we have trust in them. they know us in a way, to, you know, big projects, and especially the wastewater treatment plant. And seems like we ought to go that route unless there's a red flag that shows up when you're talking with them. And I would think that there is some type of discount in having them refinance it.
Yeah.
And I think they would rather have work than not. But also, we know how long it takes an RFP. If we think it's going to be 6 weeks, it's going to be 8 or 10. It just seems to get bogged up and dried down, and I'm afraid we'll miss an opportunity for better refinancing of it, is my feeling. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I was only talking from my past experience with RFPs in previous areas of employment. I haven't gone through the RFP process for anything here at Oak Harbor, so I'm not sure of the exact time period it would take here. But thank you.
Councilor Goebel.
Thank you, Mayor. After listening to all my fellow council members' comments, you know, this is something pretty new to me. I've never talked much about bonds and all of this kind of information, but I share a very similar sentiment as Councilmember Munns, that if who we are working with has been reliable and solid and accountable and has worked well with us, then let's continue on that page and jump on it and see if we can get those better rates. But I think just sticking with who we've been working with is my opinion for, yeah, what it's worth. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, lots of good questions and good input there. Thank you, Council. We'll now move on to our next item, which is review of purchasing policies and procedures and related Oak Harbor Municipal Code chapters. And for that, we have our Central Services Supervisor, Sandra Place. Welcome, Sandra.
Thank you, Mayor. City Council members, good afternoon. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now. I'm very excited to present this item to you today. It's a project that's near and dear to my heart. It's a project that has taken many hours to draft, and now I have the privilege to present it to you for direction, comments, and suggestions. This slide shows the purpose of the workshop item, which is to provide City Council with a draft of the updated purchasing policy and procedures. I've included that draft copy in your packet today. There's a great deal of information, and I wanted to make sure you had time to review it beforehand. When this project is complete, it will align the policy and procedures with the OHMC, providing clarity and efficiency. The last piece of the puzzle will be to create the new chapter entitled Procurement. The last major update to the OHMSC 2.310 called Purchasing and Bidding General Provisions section was done in 2006. Over the last 15 years, there has been some changes, but nothing significant to align the OHMSC with the current changes in the RCWs in regards to purchasing and bidding. Our current code is more restrictive than necessary as compared to the RCW requirements, and this creates inefficiency. An example of this would be the threshold that staff uses to process purchase requests. We currently use a dollar value limit of $1,000, and this is when staff is required to obtain 3 quotes. We submit the purchase request, which is then signed off by the requester, the department head, the finance director, and then our city administrator. As you'll see on the slides 11 through 13, that is the most conservative limit of all the 5 cities that we have compared ourselves to. This limit has been in place for as long as I can remember, and I've been doing citywide purchasing since 2006. Our code is also confusing and difficult due to overlaps. The draft has cleaned that up and will not only provide definitions, but it also provides procedures to help city staff. Lastly, we have a variety of purchasing policies and procedures that are all in different places. This one combines them all into one document, which is more efficient, and they'll be located on a network drive for everyone to access. I included this slide. This was the recent additions to the city's bid book. It contains the new legislation about bidding and procedures for cities and towns. The significant changes happened in 2020, and they deal with public works projects. There's some advantages to these revisions based on the new 2020 legislation, and that's increasing bid limits, expanding the bid decision to award project to the second lowest bidder if certain criteria are met. The small works roster limits have been increased. Unit price contracts have been added in. An example of this would be if you had a not to exceed contract for dirt hauling. It would be based on weight and tonnage. And then retainage can also be waived under $250,000 for small works roster projects. At this time, I would like to thank the city's team, because this took many hands to put together, as well as Grant Wade's office and specifically Brett Vincent, as well as all the other cities which we reviewed their policies and incorporated pieces into ours. And as always, MRSC was a wealth of information specifically on contracting. Years ago, I attended an MRSC conference, and at these procurement and contracting conferences, they always give the attendees templates and items to review. And this particular checklist was very helpful to make sure that our document contained every piece that was necessary to get the job done. This is just the first 3 pages of the document that I've included in your packet. It shows the table of contents, all of the specific items that we would like to include that are not actually in the OHMC right now. This document, when done, we will have links from the table of contents to the actual sections, making it user-friendly and efficient. Some of the proposed changes are, first, we combined all the policy and procedures into one document. And once that's complete, we will provide training to all the departments. Second, our draft document reflects the new legislation. And third, it provides additional tools that will enable staff to perform satisfactorily and efficiently at the least cost to the public. Fourth, it creates best practices to ensure that the city's budget is used within the budget capacity, that proper authorization is obtained, faster approval procedures, and ensuring transparent working methods. The inclusion of charts and examples will help make this document user-friendly, and we've included a few. And as we grow the document, it will have more. I know this is a lot of information. What we tried to do was give you some comparisons as far as what our current limits are versus and authorizations versus what others are. Local government purchases and projects fall into 5 categories. They're public works projects, purchasing of goods, equipment, supplies, and materials, professional architectural and engineering services. The 4th is personal services, and the 5th is purchased services with an ED. I have broken this presentation into 2 sections because they're very different things. Purchasing for materials and supplies and equipment is definitely different than public works, A&E, and personal services. The next 3 slides outlined was our current limits versus these other cities. And we compared with the 5 other cities are the ones that we obtained their documents to review. And in fact, Brent Vinson was part of the process for 2 of these cities. I believe it was Stanwood and Lake Stevens. But what I would like to highlight in this discussion is that there's 2 conversations to have, one on the limits and one on the authorization of the limits. And so you can see we have Stanwood, Poulsbo, we compared Anacortes and Mukilteo. So this current slide here shows the current levels that the city of Oak Harbor uses and our current authorization levels. And what we're proposing is to raise that from $1,000 up to $5,000. $5,000 was chosen because that's where our capital threshold begins. And it would be nice to keep it at the $5,000 so we can track our capital assets easier. We're proposing to increase the formal bid limit from the $30,000 to the $50,000. And the authorization would rise as the threshold rises. So for instance, the $5,000 would be where we require the 3 written quotes. From $5,000 to $50,000, the city administrator and or the mayor has the approval, and then over $50,000 would be city council approval. Some of the discussion points for this first part are to talk about the limits and how comfortable city council is with increasing these limits to align with the RCWs. How comfortable city council is with the levels of the authority proposed. And then we can also talk about future changes to the policy, such as changing the policy. The policy can change and then we bring it to council, or the council would like only certain sections to be able to be brought back if it's changed without throughout the year or throughout as legislation changes. And I'm not sure if we're allowed to stop at this point and talk and discuss, or would you like me to continue on to the end?
How much more do you have to cover?
Part 2 is on public works projects, and that's definitely more difficult than this first part.
Okay, I'm not seeing any hands, so why don't you go ahead and continue then for now?
Okay, thank you, Mayor.
You bet.
So what I did on these next slides is did a very similar process. We used the same cities to compare to, but you'll see the columns are different because we start talking about limited public works and small works roster, public works and doing the formal bid process, A&E with professional services, and then personal services. And you can see that we're all across the board. There, I was hoping to see at least some of them that were identical, but really everybody has their own authorization limits as well as thresholds. And we use the same cities on these charts as well. So this last slide here shows what is our current for small works roster and so on, and what we're proposing. And currently we're at a 200,000. Let's just start with the small works roster. I guess we have a $200,000 limit. The RCW has since raised that to 350,000. And we would like to propose to put it up to that level for the bidding for using the small works roster, and then talk about what is the council authorization that you would like to have it at. Formal bid process, that would be anything over the $350,000. And then professional services comes in at $200,000 right now. We're talking, or excuse me, the approval process is at 10,000. We're asking to bring it up to the 100,000, which is similar to the other cities. Personal services is at 10,000 currently. We'd like to bring that up to the 50,000 and stay consistent with all of the formal bidding, as well as for purchase services at the $50,000. Sorry, my light just went off in my office. Again, I brought the same discussion points. We want to make sure council is comfortable with the limits, that council is comfortable with the authority levels, and again, how to go forward with future changes to the policy, whether they need to be brought back to city council or we can do it internally with reporting back to city council afterwards. The next step of the process would be to repeal the OHMSC 2.310 to 2.390. Then we would replace it with a new chapter called procurement. We would then take it back to city council for adoption. And our outcome is that we will have a clear and efficient procurement chapter of the OHMSC. And that legal would be taking that piece of the puzzle. At this time, I will stand for questions and discussion.
Well, first, I'd like to say nice job, Sandra. A lot of work. I know that you are passionate about this, and it shows. So, thank you very much for your work on this.
Thank you.
Let's go to council. Councilor Servadius.
Ditto, Sandra. Thank you. When you see something that hasn't had a major revision for 15 years, it's had some updates or changes. That's obviously a lot of work to go through. As far as the dollar amounts, for me, I would prefer to keep them low so the council sees those items. We're the ones, that's one of our two main priorities here is budget and finance. And we're also the ones out on the street that usually encounter the public or read about the public comments on social media with you spent what on what. And so for me, I would like to see that stuff come through while keeping it efficient. And I know traditionally in the public works there, that limit of $1,000, it went through, the city administrator, finance director, council, some of that stuff, just so that everybody had a good eyeball on what was going on. I don't know if it needs to be as low as 1,000. I could support, 5,000, but most of these, I guess without sorting through all of them, for me personally, I want to keep it lower. When I start seeing, if you go forward a slide, there was $350,000 of approval at the city administrator or mayor level.
Mm-hmm.
I can't sign off on that. I mean, that's what the city council is here to do, is keep an eye on that stuff. So I would much rather see those limits be much lower. We have a chance to weigh in on it. We're aware of what's going on, and then we're able to be informed if it comes up in the public setting. That's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you.
Councilor Mack.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Sandra. That's a lot of work going through all of that detailed information. And, in my opinion, personally, that's what the council is here for. You have 7 people, depending upon who's at the voting meeting. I think it's really important to give the council the vote option on this versus 1 or possibly 2 people, mayor or administrator, to watch this. Again, with dollars tight, the public looks at this real closely, or more closely than ever before. When their funds are tight, they look at what's happening around it, where their money's being spent. I think the council should be deciding. I would prefer to keep them on the more conservative side. Yes, I think there's some movement that some of the older numbers, as Council Member Servadius pointed out, from 1,000 to 5,000. Some of them can go from 5 to 10. We need to get up to date. Things cost more than they used to. But when it comes to some of these major decisions, yes, we want to be efficient. We got to move quickly. When something's down, it's got to be replaced. And I think that could be done as well. But I do believe that these major numbers should go to the council for decision. Thank you. And again, thank you, Sandra.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilors Servadius and Councilor Mack. Any other input or questions? Councilor Wiesner.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, certainly this code need to be updated, and thank you very much, Sandra, for taking the lead and seeing it and noticing it and making it happen, right? Obviously, the old code, money has changed over the 15 years and how cities operate. I certainly, when it comes to the policy side of this thing, absolutely, I think that the council needs to stay on point on policy. That is our job, policy. And so when it comes to revisions and future revisions in the purchasing policy, I strongly feel that is absolutely a council position, and we need to be involved in that policy making moving forward. As far as the amounts, I quite frankly, think that, the staff and administration need to have the tools they need to be able to run the city efficiently. We're probably not doing it as efficiently as we could. At the same time, certainly the council is here as that watch measure, right? Ultimately, the buck stops here when it comes to money spending. And so I certainly absolutely get where the other 2 councilors are coming from in keeping that part in check and taking our responsibility for that seriously. So I guess on that end, I'd be looking for a happy medium somewhere here, I guess, making sure that we deliver the tools to the administration and to staff to be able to do their jobs efficiently and appropriately, yet have the overwatch of the council that we're responsible for. So I guess for lack of any other direction, I guess I'm going to say that I probably feel a little more comfortable with some numbers that would be in the middle of what's proposed and what we previously had. I certainly think there needs to be an increase and a tweak in the current program. Certainly just inflation alone, right? Over 15 years, things have gone up, at least doubled, right? And I think if you start doing the math, right, if we took a $10,000 figure that we've got now that we're proposing to take to $50,000, and if we, maybe took a number like $25,000, that may be appropriate, right? It adjusts for the past 15 years and still gives that flexibility in spending, but still gives us a little bit control. So that's my 2 cents. I'm amicable to. I certainly think there needs to be a raise in these, and I think we need to give that more and more day-to-day control over the folks that we have hired to do the day-to-day operations while still having the council oversight.
Okay.
That's it.
Thank you, Councilor Wiesner. Mayor Pro Tem. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. Sandra, a lot of hours, more than you have in your normal day, I would assume you've spent on this, your heart and soul. So thank you. I think it's easy to go the 5,000 limit. So in all of this, right now, the mayor can write a check if needed up to what, 30,000?
Currently you, well, breaking it into two pieces, currently anything under $30,000, when we're talking about this yellow part, the materials, supplies and equipment, it's 30,000 or less. After that, we take it to city council. There's actually two different levels here. So I guess the direction on this one would be that piece is right now we're at 30,000. We'd like to increase it to the 50. But if we start talking about public works projects and A&E and all that, or previously we had it at 30,000 and city council dropped it down to that 10,000. And I think at the very least, we would love to have it back to the 30,000 at the very least, but we were proposing the 50,000 just to keep in line with what we were proposing with the material, supplies and equipment. But there again, I want to make sure city council is super comfortable and I just need some direction on how to present it to bring it forward for approval.
Okay, 13 years, we've had some situations where we weren't having the monies come into our coffers, and so we've dropped things down. We've had incidents where long time ago, not against you, Mayor Bob, but America just start, 30,000, 30,000, 30, it can add up pretty quickly. The 300,000, I felt like a panic was happening, that it could be spent without going through the council. So I want to clean it up. I want to make it more efficient, but some of the numbers, it just seems too much, especially when we would be the ones that would be attacked for the paper says, oh, well, the council agreed that they could spend up to 350,000. So this was 329,000 and blah, 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 blah. So I still think because we're the budget that we need to have that. So compromise, happy medium somewhere. I don't think this has to be approved at the next meeting, but I would like to see some more on it. But I know this is an immense amount of work you have done and whoever else you had help with you. So I guess I go along with Councilman Wiesner. There's maybe a happy medium somewhere. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Councilor Heisland.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Sandra. This is great. I can definitely sympathize. When I worked at Island County and had to get approval for purchases over $5,000 when I was running an entire program and it was grant funded. And so I was frequently on a very short timeline and trying to get things in front of the commissioner. I mean, it was completely impractical. It made life very difficult, actually. So in terms of just departmental authority to make those kinds of everyday purchases, I absolutely support the employees on that. And having been on council for a while, yes, we do get a lot of, oh my God, you spent what on what? And sometimes it's not stuff we were aware of, and sometimes it was, but I think that just some communication could clear a lot of that up. You know, if there are any big purchases, just let us know. I don't necessarily think we need to approve them, but you know, so I would like to see just some kind of communication policy versus I don't know, council control policy. So, you know, when you're looking at numbers like 350,000, obviously, I mean, that is a little scary, but I don't think that what you're proposing is out of line with other cities. And, you know, at the end of the day, we have to trust our employees to do what they were hired to do. And so if we have an employee or a department that we're that concerned about having that control over their spending, then we probably need to reevaluate how that's going and not necessarily the policy. So I agree with the happy medium, but I would probably err on the side of giving that autonomy to the employees. And I just don't want to get into the weeds of starting to micromanage, but I trust that you'll be able to find that comfortable spot for us, because like the other council member said, it is our job to oversee this. So just, yeah, keep us in the loop. And I think we can find something we're all comfortable with. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Goebel.
Thank you, Mayor. I feel pretty similar to Councilmember Heisen and Councilmember Munns and Wiesner. You know, I don't want the council to get into the weeds and have to slow down your guys' everyday job. I can only imagine how frustrating that could be at times when you want to make something happen and then you have to wait for a workshop or a meeting. So I want to prevent, you know, creating any sort of deficiencies in your schedule. But I also do feel that it is important for the council to be involved in some of the larger purchases, just out of the aspect that we are representing, you know, the taxpayers, and this is taxpayers' money. And so we don't want to, you know, look like we're not keeping a steady, you know, finger on the pulse to make sure things are going smoothly and we're working towards some sort of strategic goal. And so I, you know, I'm going to say the same thing as Councilmember Munns and Wiesner, but that happy medium for those proposed numbers, you know, I think you know, just somewhere in between what's current and what's proposed. I just, again, I don't want to make your guys' jobs more difficult and slow things down, but I also want to be, you know, sensitive to what we are spending and how that looks to the general public. And so that's where I stand at the moment. So, and Sandra, thank you so much for doing all of this. I bow down to your ability to compartmentalize and organize all of this, because it is so hard to look at something that is, you know, 15 years old and then make it something shiny and new. So good job.
Thank you. I'll tell you, the numbers did start meshing after a while. There's quite a few of them.
Okay, I think that concludes the comments then for this section. Thank you very much again, Sandra. We'll move on to our next section, which is administration. I'm going to attempt to say this one time, and Ángel de la Creatividad Sculpture Project Update. City Archaeologist and Arts Commission Liaison Gideon Kaufman will be presenting this item. I'd like to thank Gideon for taking over as the project contact for this sculpture, and his new role as the staff contact for the Arts Commission. Gideon, thank you. Gideon has relocated to City Hall to provide an increased connection between development services and engineering for projects like this and others involving multiple departments. So Gideon, welcome and thanks. I'll turn it over to you for now.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. This was a team effort. So I really just want to give a shout out to Lisa Felix and Sabrina Combs, Anna Thompson and Grant Weed, and you'll be seeing all kinds of stuff. Can you folks see the slides all right? I just got to ask. I'm sharing my screen.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yep.
So one of the first changes was the name. So we went with DELA CREATIVIDAD, which is what Sebastian had named the sculpture. He's from Mexico, and diversity is something that not only should be celebrated, but also, or not only acknowledged, but also celebrated. One of the best ways to do that is through language. At the last meeting on February 16th, City Council requested staff to provide more information and develop different legal agreements. A little more background, the Arts Commission and representatives from Sculpture Northwest, and they're actually here today, did a presentation about the sculpture with the city administrator and the mayor, with the opportunity of bringing it to Oak Harbor. It's currently up in Bellingham, and Bellingham could not take it on. The Arts Commission and representatives of Sculpture Northwest presented the statue and location at Windjammer Park to the park board. I'll be talking about that later and how that meeting went. The Arts Commission and representatives from Sculpture Northwest provided information about the statue, and Park Operations Manager presented an overview of potential project to City Council on February 16th, 2021. Council, you provided comments, directed staff to return at the March City Council workshop to address some of those requests, and here we are today. Here's some of the requests. You'd wanted photographs of the sculpture, different options for placement, the concern of structural integrity of the sculpture came up a couple of times, as well as design specifications, of course, overall costs, and draft legal agreements, as well as a request for proposal, which is part of the structural integrity issue. Here's some photographs of it. So it's still this red-orange color. We have a distal photograph on the left, proximal in the middle there, and an overview photograph on the right. Here's the signature that was done by Sebastian. Very cool method of doing it using a torch. We also got design specifications of the sculpture. So although they're in Spanish, they could easily be translated into Imperial. These were attached to the RFP, the draft RFP, I should say, which is part of your summary. Regarding the structural integrity, draft request for proposal for a structural engineer was required to assess the sculpture. This is above what is asked in revised Code of Washington. The RCW says it's for structures that are 100 feet tall or taller. This is around 37 feet. So we are kind of going above and beyond. However, the process for the RFP can't move forward until the MOU is signed. So that memorandum of understanding is really the linchpin for this project to move forward. The objective is to receive an assessment from the engineer, as well as determine a cost estimate, design a foundation, and assist with the permitting and construction process. Cost. So the overall cost will be determined by the engineer, providing a cost estimate, of course. The estate agrees to pay for any costs that exceeds $35,000. And we had put that in the agreement. We know it's been stated informally, but as part of the gifting agreement. Maintenance costs. Former Parks Operations Manager determined the cost for cleaning. It's about $1,000 per cleaning by public works staff. So they're going to have to rent a cherry picker in order to reach some of those locations with a power washer. There are some unknowns, though, as far as how many cleanings per year this is going to require. The growlers, I believe, and Lisa, you might correct me, I think it's every other year. So they're further upland, so there's not going to be the same impacts that seagulls might give this one, because this is going to be right next to the water. The other question is, how will the cleaning be funded? Will it come from the Parks Division, or will it be from the Parks Commission, or maybe a combination of both? For the MOU, the legal department drafted the agreement between the City of Oak Harbor and Sculpture Northwest. Sculpture Northwest, of course, is a 501c3 nonprofit. It defines the partnership between both parties, so I think that is really what makes this crucial. Some elements of this agreement, or the understanding, I should say, the city will have the final decision regarding the placement of the statue. Sculpture Northwest will obtain the necessary permits, as well as have the various types of insurance, so automobile liability, general commercial liability, and other forms of insurance. And the project must adhere to the city's bidding process. It's really good that Sandra was here and gave the presentation before I went, which kind of outlined why the city does that, getting 3 cost estimates and prevailing wage and whatnot. Next important paperwork is the gifting agreement with the estate. This removes any copyrights associated with the sculpture. So I know council had that concern before about using it in photographs or postcards and whatnot. This essentially removes that. The city can terminate from the agreement within 30 days of it being executed. However, the MOU must be signed by both parties first before the gifting agreement. So projects, next steps. Obviously, we as staff, we're here to get feedback from you folks. We're not, if we could receive signatures on the MOU, that would be great. The next step after that, the legal department will have to present a city resolution to city council to accept the gift. Then send the RFP out to bid for the final contract is executed. The contractor or city staff can conduct community feedback and whatnot. We also have 2 locations for you folks to select, either A or B. This was through the park board, but we're asking that you use what the engineering assessment states, as well as what the Public Works Parks Division maintenance crew says, so they could get their lawnmower around the thing, make sure we're not putting it on irrigation, stuff like that. And of course, the city archaeologists will begin to evaluate the land once the site location is approved. If it's unsigned, that's no problem at all. Really what it means though is staff time can't be used for the boots on the ground type of stuff. Essentially, we'll be re-editing the MOU or gifting agreement, and it will go back to city council at the April 28th workshop. So any questions about the MOU or the gifting agreement or RFP, the request for proposal?
Okay, it looks like we do have some hands. First up is Councilor Wiesner.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Gideon, for that presentation. When it comes to this initial engineering, that we're going to have an engineer to look at the structural integrity of the statue to even determine, whether they can handle the wind zone and et cetera we're in. I assume that's on the city, that's coming out. Is that coming out of, first off, is that coming out of the $35,000?
So from my understanding of it, that $35K, which can be used for engineering, it needs to go through the bidding process, which is where I know Richard is here from Sculpture Northwest. He could probably glean some light onto some of this as well. I know that's where there's a discrepancy as far as getting an engineer to look at it, because we have to get 3 cost estimates and essentially put it out for bid.
Ultimately, I guess what I'm getting at is what we had talked about was capping the city expense involved in doing this project at $35,000, and I'm trying to make sure I wrap my head around. We've obviously got city staff time, and we've got legal counsel time that we've already put into this thing, but is that a true cap? Is that our maximum exposure?
From my understanding, it is. So that's what we put in the MOU. So anything beyond that $35,000, which is getting paid through the Arts Commission Fund, Creative Arts Fund, will be paid for by the estate.
And then again, my assumption, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm assuming that our $35,000, that Art Commission $35,000, is the first money in for this project.
That's probably a correct assumption. I could double check with Sculpture Northwest, but and of course, I believe they have some time into this project, but I don't know what kind of financial.
Yeah, we've got quite a bit of time, but so I guess my concern, and I'm just pointing this out, right, so that we're all thinking now out loud here, is obviously with us being the first money in, there could be a point at which this doesn't work out, whether it be structural engineering or something along that line, and we could find ourselves spending a little bit of money here before we get to that point.
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
May I chime in?
Hi, Richard. Yeah, we can hear you.
Hi. Yeah. Originally, and this was something that you had pointed out to us, Councilman, is that what we've done is we're putting all of the money that's going to be used for the project into an S&W coffer, and it will be distributed as needed. The city will not be giving any money to us or anyone else until the project is completed and installed. So we were going to take over all of that end of it. Now, I don't know if that's something, the bidding thing is new to me too, because I thought initially that because SNW was going to be the project manager for the sculpture and also work in combination with the city, that the bidding process wasn't necessary. We already had all the contractors lined up. So I'm a little confused about what's happening right now regarding that. And so, but at any rate, your question specifically is there won't be any expense to the city until the project is completed and installed.
And that's great. That's great news. I mean, obviously that addresses that concern, right? As long as that is appropriately covered in the MOU, that money exchanges hands from the Arts Commission to Sculptors Northwest at the time of completion of the project, and then obviously that addresses that concern. The only other concern I've got, and you know, I voiced it once before, but I think again, I think it's appropriately addressed, and you addressed it, Gideon, in your presentation, and the fact that the city is going to have final say on the location. And I know at the same time, we're going to need to be respectful to the estate, who had some specific desire for location, specifically being near water. I am just still a little bit concerned about placing anything in Windjammer Park when we don't have the rest of our phasing plan that we're in the process of trying to develop. My fear is that you know, something not properly placed with the entire scope of what the rest of that park build out is going to look at, we could find ourselves going that wasn't a real smart idea. So you know, certainly we can address that as we go through the process, you know, and my concerns could either be qualmed or addressed in some other way, because it sounds as though we've got that covered through this MOU, and the fact that choice A or choice B are not the only two choices. I'm once again going to toss out Catalina Park as a park that I think is underutilized, that makes sense, but I'm not totally opposed to location A or B, but I certainly have concerns about that build out before we have the rest of that park vision drawn out. So that's all I have right now. Thank you.
And thanks, Mr. Wosner. I always enjoy working with you and whatnot. And don't be a stranger and stop by my office anytime. Hey, Sandra, and I guess also Anna, did I address those questions all right regarding what Mr. Wosner was saying? I realize I kind of jumped the gun on things, and maybe you have
bidding such.
Yeah. And the 35,000, are we going to?
Yeah, well, my understanding is that we were just going to pay that towards the overall costs. I mean, I'm sure that the overall costs are going to greatly exceed 35,000. And then my understanding was that Sculpture Northwest would just pick up the remainder of the bill. That was just our commitment that council was able to authorize.
And then it sounds like there was a question about bidding and public works. That's something that is statutory. So state law says that if the city is going to be doing something that is defined as a public work with respect to construction, alteration, repair, or improvement, other than ordinary maintenance, that we have to go out for bid, that we have to treat it as a public work. So,
And
that's
I'd like
responsibility.
to add on to that, Anna, if I could, please.
Yeah, please.
Anna's exactly correct. So what we're talking about here is that we have a mix of money, and when it's a mix of money, as soon as the city puts that dime in, it becomes a public works project, and therefore we have to follow our procurement process, whether the greater money is from the arts or not. So if it was a split project, not bid splitting, but a split project, so let's just say the city said that we're going to start the process with engineering and it's going to go up to $35,000, then the city would follow our procurement up to and get that particular piece done. Once that's done, our obligation is finished, and then the rest of the project goes to the art part of it. Then they would follow their own procurement process, but when all is said and done, they would donate that all back to the city per this agreement that we're talking about.
Well, I'm going to jump back in if it's okay, Mayor, because I think obviously that's a discussion I think sounds like needs to happen between staff and Sculptures Northwest, that there maybe some more discussion there, because the way I'm understanding it and the way I'm picturing it now, according to what Mr. Nash has told me, is the city is not going to be hiring the engineer and the city is not going to be doing the project. In the end, the city is going to be providing a $35,000 cost to Sculptures Northwest, and whether that's for the installation, the construction, or the purchase of the art piece, that's all things I think that you guys all need to get together and work out. But in the end, what Anna's kind of describing to me as far as the contract, the MOU, the $35,000 that the city is going to spend that, and once we're done spending that, Sculptures Northwest takes on the rest, is totally the opposite, I guess, from what I had envisioned, and maybe even I think what Sculpture Northwest envisioned. What I had envisioned was when we have a finished product, when it is 100% done, and only at that point in time is the city obligated to disperse $35,000 from the Arts Fund. That's what I was expecting in this discussion, and it sounds like Sculptures Northwest is on board with that, but it sounds like we've got it set up where city's money's in first, and therefore it would be a city project going out for bid for engineers, etc., versus the purchase of the art sculpture or whatever at the end of the project.
Okay, so I'm going to jump in here real quick, and I know we've got three more counselors with questions too, but obviously the engineering consultant selection portion of the MOU in your packet does talk about the RCW 3904010, and I believe that our city attorney has determined that we have to follow a process. So that, and I think that's what Sandra certainly was talking about, and Mr. Weed, of course, is having surgery today, but that's my understanding, is that we're supposed to be following this RCW process, which requires a bid or more than one bid. And so we're going to have to clear that up, obviously, and I don't think we can expect that out of Gideon today, but we certainly are going to have to clear that up with Sculpture Northwest and our city attorney. So I don't know that we've got a good answer other than the way I read it in this proposed memorandum of understanding, is that there will be a bid process expected. So I don't think I've answered your question, and I don't know that I've got that answer. And Anna, if you see that differently, chime in.
No, I mean, that's what has to go forward with the mixture of money, just like Sandra said. That's unquestionable. So
we'll have.
And this is Brett Vincent.
I've worked a little bit with Anna, and as usual, she's exactly right on this. Usually if there's any sort of city money that is involved, the process, the bidding process needs to occur, especially if it's going to be used towards a public works related project, which is either a creation or improvement or maintenance of a public asset. So I think that's the basis for what we are discussing tonight.
So of course, Brett Vinson is with Weed Grafstra, our attorney's law firm. So there may be more questions about that, but let's move forward with did you have any more, Councilor Wiesner?
No, thank you, Mayor. That was it. Thank you very much.
Okay, let's move to Councilor Servadius.
Thank you. First and foremost, I want to reiterate that I'm incredibly excited about the possibilities of this project. If you have not had a chance to go out and research the artist, it's a very impressive resume. I was just sitting here looking at some of his major installations, and I'll read them before I get into my comments. I've just hit some of the bigger cities: San Antonio, Mexico City, obviously, Dublin, Ireland, Denver, New York, Rio de Janeiro, multiple installations in Spain and Japan. So when I think about little old Oak Harbor getting a major piece from this artist, it's very, very impressive. Obviously, we want to do all the right things, do it right, do it legally. But I'm going to go through some comments. The first thing that comes to mind for me is consistency. And I don't know who can answer this, but the most recent similar installation that we had was the founder sculpture on the other end of Windjammer Park. Did we go through all of the same criteria outlined on page 216, getting different RFPs from engineers, paying a prevailing wage, and then charge the staff costs to the Creative Arts Fund? Did we do all of that for that sculpture?
We'd have to look at the history on that. Would you like us to do that for you?
Mr. Nash, you're on the phone. I think you were the project manager. Did we go through those same procedures for the founder sculpture?
Did the city give money for that though?
I believe, and we could look into it, that fell under the park improvements. So that was under GCCM, which general contract manager. So things didn't go out to bid. It didn't follow the usual process. But this is one where we have to do design, bid, build.
So like I say, consistency to me is key. And that was a fairly similar project. With regards to an RFP, well, let me ask this question. There's only one of these statues in the world, is that correct?
Am I answering that?
Yes, Mr. Nash, please.
I'm sorry, okay.
Angel de la Creatividad, is there more than one that we know of?
No, there is not.
So might that qualify it for a sole source purchase, Sandra?
Yes, council member.
So if it's a sole source, do we need to go out for multiple bids and RFPs?
Well, you're talking about two different things. So a sole source of buying the equipment, because it's its own piece of art there's no other one. But once you put it into the ground, it becomes a public works project. So there's two different things we're talking about here: procurement of the item and then installation of the item.
So when this was originally introduced to us, in the story that I've heard all along, is that Sculpture Northwest will handle this with their project manager from beginning to end. The city gives no money until the artwork is in the ground and installed. And at that point, the Creative Arts Fund makes a donation, a reimbursement, I don't know exactly what that's called, or if that matters what it's called, to Sculpture Northwest. So as long as, let's say we're hiring NASA to build a missile silo in the middle of Windjammer Park, if they're the only ones that can do that, obviously our engineers would review their work, but we're not going to require multiple. If Sculpture Northwest has an engineer or a structural weld, I mean, obviously there's an engineer for the piles And the foundation, there's also, as I understand it, they have someone, I don't know, Mr. Nash, if they're an engineer, but they are a commercial weld inspector, that's what they do for a living. If we're having them do all of the work, obviously we want to be covered from a liability standpoint once we inherit this, but can we not just review their engineers' work, as long as they're engineers, and not have to go through this RFP process? I'll pause there. If it's a sole, there's only one of these, could it be, and I don't know if Sculpture Northwest would prefer that, but I'm guessing they would for simplicity, could this be construed as a sole source project, or it's we're receiving a gift, they just want to install it on public property? So we can deliberate this thing and make it incredibly convoluted. And when I read this RFP or the draft language of wanting a year of, it's a 2-year contract, so up to a year to research it and then a year to install it, that's kind of ludicrous. I mean, I think this is something where we could have a victory in 4 to 6 months and have it down there. I know that, and I'm going to come back to the sole source. I haven't let go of that. Mr. Wiesner, you talked about wanting phase 2 and the rest of the park to be complete. Well, we've budgeted $7.5 million or whatever it is for phase 2. I don't know when that's going to happen. That could be 3 to 5 years from now before phase 2 is completed. And so I don't think we give up on inheriting a world-renowned artist gift based on phase 2. So let's come back to sole source. Whoever wants to, and maybe you need to research it, but is there a way that this could be construed as a sole source project gift that simplifies this process for Sculpture Northwest and the city is still protected? Anyone?
So that would sound to me like that's a great question, actually, and I think that that's going to take a combination of our purchasing people and our legal staff.
Mayor?
Yes.
Yeah, I think we'll definitely need to research that, but just looking at our code, sole source, a contract for purchase of materials, supplies, or equipment may be awarded without complying. So, yeah, I mean, we'll definitely have to look at that, but, you know, just looking at the plain language of our code, it's talking about materials, supplies, or equipment, not gifts.
So I would ask for a possible paradigm shift on staff's part, that we are receiving a gift. Ram Construction, it sounds like they have the liability. They will do it from start to finish. All of those costs, as I understand it, are reimbursed by the estate. Everything is reimbursed by the estate. Everything is reimbursed by the estate. And once the statue is installed, Sculpture Northwest is asking for a reimbursement of $35,000. So once again, a paradigm shift as to how that could work without getting bogged down in bureaucracy would be greatly appreciated. And the last point I'll make is on page 217 in the packet, it talks about maintenance. And there's some language in there in the MOU. It said to address council members Servadius and Max concerns. I don't have any concerns as far as cleaning and maintenance, except that I don't think that should be the responsibility of Sculpture Northwest. What I did say, and I'd have to go back and watch the video, is I don't know that we asked the Creative Art Fund to go out and maintain any of the other pieces. I think of the original one, I think the very first one was out at Windjammer, and it's called Awakening. It's like a seed pod that's opening. I don't think that we ask the Creative Arts Fund, or if we go out there and we weed eat around that, or if we had to clean graffiti off of that, and I could be wrong, if we've ever billed the Creative Arts Fund. Obviously, this statue, if it's in a prominent location and it's a color that would show the elements, i.e. seagull poop, it may need some more maintenance, and whether that's actually taking a boom truck out there, yes, it's 37 feet tall, or I've got a pressure washing wand that from the ground floor, I can reach almost 30 feet in the air. So, you know, a little handheld pressure washer on the wand, somebody maybe goes out there annually, and maybe that, you know, does have to be billed to the Creative Arts Fund. But if I read the MOU correctly, it talks about that and the repainting being billed or handled by Sculpture Northwest. And I just don't think we expect that out of any other artist that's installed art in Oak Harbor. Moonwaves, I'm trying to think of some of the bigger pieces. Autumn Leaves, I mean, that was built and bought, but then we maintain it. In this case, we would receive a gift, and if we do receive that gift, then we would maintain it. So that's all I have at the moment. Thank you.
Okay, Councilor, thank you, Councilor Servadius. Councilor Heisen.
Thank you, Mayor. I just very quickly, thank you for the work that went into this. The fact that you came back with an agenda item that literally went point by point through every one of our questions from the meeting is really impressive and very much appreciated. And in terms of location, I mean, I don't want to second guess the Parks Board or the Art Commission or the estate that's gifting us this, but it was suggested at the meeting that maybe Flintstone Park would be a good option, or Catalina. Windjammer already has so many bells and whistles, and I agree with Councilmember Wiesner that Catalina is underutilized, and Flintstone as well. I can see it sitting out there on that rounded point, you know, greeting boats as they come into the harbor. I think that would be quite a statement piece. So, I mean, perhaps there's a reason why we're kind of stuck on Windjammer right now, but I'd like to see us explore some other options. And again, thank you to staff, to Sculpture Northwest. This is bigger, literally, than anything the city has ever taken on before. And it's very unique. It's very intimidating. It is a lot of work, and that I just want staff to know that we're very aware of that, and we appreciate it. It's a big project, and hopefully we can see this through. I'm excited about it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilor Heisen. Councilor Mack.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Mr. Kaufman and staff, for the presentation. You know, I've been giving this a lot of thought to this proposed sculpture. And in my opinion, we need to be listening more to the residents of Oak Harbor. From all the responses that the city has received via Zen City, the public comments sent to the city via the city's website by local residents and social media, as well as comments that I have received personally from various constituents, they would prefer an alternative piece that reflects our aesthetics and local heritage and is more conducive to our area. This park belongs to the residents of Oak Harbor, and they should have a strong voice in the decisions that affects these parks. And in my opinion, they have spoken, and they have said no thank you to this particular sculpture. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Mack. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to thank Gideon Kaufman and Ms. Thompson and other staff members who've put a lot of work and time. But it seems I would agree with Mr. Servadius. This has been twisted. It's like we're putting up all these blocks and building walls that they have to crawl over. It's a gift. And yes, I want to be sure that we're not liable for something that wasn't done correctly, but the estate or the Northwest group has put a lot of work into being sure they have the professionals. When you have a $400,000 or $500,000 sculpture, you don't want to fall over. How do we get to yes? That's all I want to know. How do we get to yes? Right now, I've just heard no, no, no. And so far, the letters and stuff that I've gotten, the public approves of this. And we have Dutch heritage, but we are not a Dutch themed town. And I know that I was not able to go out and see locations but, and I haven't, I mean, I didn't know that that was really narrowed down, but I would think that, near the city dock there, if you want to call it Flintstone Park of it, but that is part of Windjammer also, might be a place. I mean, I can see this as you come in. We come in with our boat all the time. How outstanding it would be in either place. I'm guessing over near the basketball courts or whatever, but how do we get to yes? I'm just hearing all these no's instead of, well, this could work, or we could, you know, I just, thank you.
I said you need to have an MOU signed as the first step, is getting the MOU signed. And it does say draft on it. So, I mean, feel free to mark it up. I'm sure both parties will mark it up. Yeah, getting the yes, first step, getting that memorandum of understanding signed.
Thank you, Denny. I wasn't trying to attack, but it just seemed like from where we were at the last meeting, just discussing this and what things had to be done, all I see today is we've put it in a box with all these tile walls and there's no way to get out of it. And I just think somehow it got twisted, but thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Councilor Wiesner.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to clarify a couple of things. First off, I wanted to clarify my statement involving my concern with Windjammer Park. And the concern is we do not have final phase drawings. We're in the process right now, obviously, with our Parks Board of coming up with some idea of what the next phase. I'm not looking to have the park completed before doing anything, but I am concerned anytime we're going to place something that is permanent in a location where we have not determined exactly what's going on around it. We know that we're going to be doing some continued construction down there. And until we have that in a drawing and a plan that we've all agreed upon, I'm apprehensive about placing something permanent down there. So just a clarification, not looking for Windjammer Park to be built, but looking for that plan. And I know we have a phase 2, phase 3 preliminary plan that we're revisiting that, and we're revisiting that to try and align with our comp plan and our budget for that park moving forward. So that was my concern there. Secondly, I wanted to clarify what my suggestion was back when we started all of this in order to make this work, because, you know, we all had a lot of concerns about staff time and bids and costs and cost overruns and engineers and all of that type of stuff. And I just want to go back to my basic suggestion that we purchase the sculpture from Sculptures Northwest for the amount of $35,000, and that is a delivered and installed price. It's delivered and installed to city specifications with city approval, all the permits required, all the engineering required, the location as determined by the city. That would be a sole source purchase. It would be like no difference than purchasing any other piece of art that we've purchased in years past, other than it is a delivered and installed price. We would then pay for it at the end. It would be a fixed price, and you know, getting it to the end would be Sculpture Northwest's job, again, with all of the permitting and all of the inspections as required for any other type of project that would be taken on. The only difference is this is going to be placed on public ground. So, you know, I don't know that it's much different than we purchase other art pieces that we place on public ground. So that was my easy solution back when we started this thing, and that's why I was kind of confused when I saw these MOUs and talking about, you know, city money out first and city hiring engineers and city doing all of this stuff. Kind of defeats the purpose. If we're going to have city staff tied up in RFPs and all of these other things, that certainly wasn't the intention of what I thought we had discussed back when we were looking at moving forward here. So I just wanted to clarify those two issues, and I certainly appreciate staff's time on this. I know we keep loading stuff on you guys, and this is not a simple project, and I certainly appreciate Sculptures Northwest continuing to hang in there while we work through this. This is obviously something that we don't do on a daily basis, and we want to get it right for all the parties concerned. And that's why we obviously have to have these discussions. So I appreciate everybody's time. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Wiesner. Councilor Goebel.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate everyone's time and efforts, both city staff and all of our council members. I know this has been kind of came up quickly, and it has a lot of importance with the size and the undertaking of this project. So I just want to say I appreciate everyone's time. With that being said, Councilor Cervantes, thank you for bringing up your opinion about this being looked at as a sole source project, and Councilmember Wiesner, that's how I understood it as well when it was originally presented. So I hope that we can kind of look into the validity of that this is a sole source project, and we can just make this a simpler and more efficient project for both the Sculptures Northwest and for the city, that we can alleviate some, added stress and work time if we look at it through that lens. I support this structure. I'm excited about this and happy we're getting, some legal documents drawn up that's going to prevent the city from being in a liable position. I remember traveling around Europe in college and how much tourism was generated through art. And so it's really exciting to think that, Oak Harbor could potentially be a place on the map that people would come to see this sculpture. So I support this. I hope that we can find a way to make this, again, simpler and more efficient, and that this is looked at as a sole source project. And yeah, again, thank you everyone for spending your time and hard work on this. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Councilor Goebel. Back to Councilor Servadius.
I appreciate how succinctly Councilmember Wiesner summed up the, hey, let's just buy a finished project built to our specifications. That's a great way to think about it. Hopefully we can do that. Is there anywhere in the packet? I know from being down there when we did the tour and then through the Parks Board, the two locations, am I missing that? Is that in the packet so the rest of my peers have that as well?
That's the next slide. There you go.
Oh, thanks. I was wondering how much we all dove in here, Gideon, how much you still had to go.
No, this is the second to last one, I believe. So for you, but yeah.
So that's an old, A is basically just south of the kitchen right now.
Exactly that. Yeah, I was just going to use here's laser pointer. Yeah, so the kitchen's just right about here. And
Okay.
here's that this area is still there. That turnaround, that's still in our parking area.
And so, and if I'm just, please interrupt me if this is coming up. I do agree that Flintstone could be a unique location. There was some concerns because of the flagpole down there, that it might compete with the flagpole, although a flagpole could be moved because we're going to be improving that park. I do like Catalina as well. The reason this was more desirable, I think, from the Arts Commission is just because of the foot traffic that it would receive being down through that major entrance or that end of the park versus Flintstone or Catalina. So as far as a tourist destination, it's going to get, people may not realize what they're looking at first, but obviously if there's an informational plaque, they would see it and then know what it was. So that's all I had. Thank you.
Is Roderick, are you on the line here? He's president of Arts Commission.
I am.
No, oh, cool. Do you have any insight regarding Windjammer versus Flintstone and Catalina from the Arts Commission standpoint?
Well, I know that there's limited footprint at Flintstone, and I know that just the discussion between us and Parks Board, that just from a visibility standpoint and a maximizing visibility to folks via foot traffic and other means, that spot at Windjammer is our primary choice. I don't think that having a location is going to be, having a final location is going to be like a major roadblock to moving the MOU forward. But we do think that would be the ideal site to look at first for viability.
Great, thanks.
Okay,
May
so
I speak? Richard Nash? Can you hear me?
We could hear you, Richard.
Hi, guys. Okay, it's Richard Nash. The other thing that was I wanted to point out about the Windjammer Park site is that it also makes it much easier in terms of maintenance and even an installation. And we kind of looked at the spot just because it was kind of out of the way of any major park plans that might be coming into play in phase 2. So we thought it was kind of a good location to put it in. And also as a point of reference for what it's worth, and I don't know if empirical evidence counts in a court of law, but Sebastian just installed a piece last year down in Houston that is 65 feet tall and is 45 tons. And so, I mean, he's done a lot of very large pieces that are very structurally sound. I mean, it's just, there's no way around that. And he has dozens and dozens of pieces all over the world. So I just wanted to kind of throw that in the loop. And also that Sculpture Northwest is really looking forward to a partnership with the city of Oak Harbor. That we're not an adversarial group. We want to, if possible, and if the city chooses to accept the piece, we want to do everything we can to make this as comfortable as possible and to do it all the right way. And we will listen, and we will also give our input when needed. But we're here to get a wonderful piece into the city of Oak Harbor. Thank you.
thank you. Gideon, I've got one more question. Councilor Wiesner?
Oh, sorry, Mayor, forgot to take my hand down.
Okay. Okay. Then we'll go back to you. Did you have any final slide or any final information, Gideon?
I guess, just keep in touch. I mean, any kind of comments regarding those agreements, like I said, they're a draft form and they're watermark draft for a reason. So, I'm here to work with our legal counsel. And that's all I could really think of offhand. Oh yeah, then the location. So I could go ahead and explore using Flintstone or Catalina. Should I go ahead and talk to the Parks Board or have the Parks Commission go and talk to the Parks Board, or what do you think might be best?
So I would say that we should look at this presentation together and make a plan. Or I believe we certainly should consider those, and I want to review the entire council comments here. Okay. And I want to thank you for agreeing to help us with this project, Gideon. And there's more to come, I'm sure. I think we've gotten some great input here, especially regarding the looking at it differently. If there's any way to do that, we need to find that way and move forward. So thank you. More to come on this. And I don't think we have any other council questions or input now, so I will move on to item B under administration, which is ZIPLYFIBER contract consideration. And back to our communications and IT manager, Sabrina Combs.
Thank you, Mayor. So for this afternoon, what I wanted to share was an opportunity that the city has to consider a contract offer from ZIPLYFIBER. So ZIPLYFIBER, formerly Frontier Communications, we have been meeting with them about existing contracts that we had in place and some services. The current contract that we have with them goes through fall of 2021. And what we've been noticing too is that the city has been experiencing, which some of you may have experienced as well, some slow internet service. In working as an IT department, we identified that some of that is due to the fact that our internet speed at the city is comparable to what you'd have at your single family home. So what we need to do is get a faster speed. A comparison of those speeds is at a single family home, you'd have about 100 by 100 MBS. And what we'd like to do is get a faster speed that takes us to 1,000 by 1,000. So the options to resolve this are to look at upgrading our services. So the options for upgrading our services are to continue on our current contract as is and just accept the lower speeds that we're currently experiencing. We could increase the speed with a new 36-month contract that Ziply is offering. Or we could wait and go out to bid this summer for a new contract to take place when the current contract expires. So with that, what I'd like is council's thoughts and comments regarding which path they'd like to pursue. And if council does want to move forward with a new 36-month contract, that would take effect immediately when we sign the contract, and I would bring the contract back to council. So I'm going to open it up for council comments.
Councilor Wiesner.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for that, Sabrina. How does Ziply intend to deliver those kind of speeds?
They've done some upgrades in the area, and so when we met with them, we learned about some recent upgrades they've done with broadband and some other services, and that's where that comes from. Also, as part of the deal, we would get some new equipment upgrades to our current system.
And within the contract, is there a performance requirement for them, for Ziply?
There are some additional information pieces about that I have sent to legal to confirm, but basically what it is a standard agreement that they have similar to what you have at your home that talks about, there are some things that when there's, power outages and things like that, those aren't covered, but there are some also languages relating to how they would provide that service.
I just got to tell you honestly, I'm gravely concerned after previous business experiences with them, not being able to deliver anywhere near the speeds they committed to, and then trying to get out of the 3-year contract for them not delivering the speeds. So I would be very apprehensive unless we have some sort of assurances that we're going to get this type of speeds we're signing up for, and that we are going to need some sort of an escape clause in that contract if those speeds are not delivered, that we have the ability to terminate that contract. So those would be my concerns. I'm all for getting more speed at City Hall. You're absolutely right. In fact, last time I used my computer down there, I think I turned on my hotspot to get my computer working faster, and I was able to operate a little quickly there. So, yeah, I'd certainly want legal to dive into that contract, make sure that we've got those assurances.
I will say that I do know that their contracts are pretty standard. The contract we had last time was a standard document, and there wasn't, I don't believe, Anna, I don't know if you could provide any more insight into that, but I don't believe there was a lot of opportunity to modify that agreement. I wasn't here when it was created, so.
Out with Frontier?
Yeah.
Yeah, I now recall that Nikki had made some markups. I don't recall how far she got with them, but that's pretty standard in these IT company their world is they don't want to give much on anything when it comes to their contract.
Well, and certainly I would suggest then that maybe we look at going with other known entities that are capable of delivering those speeds and have delivered those speeds in the past, rather than an entity that has not delivered those speeds in the past and are claiming that they're able to do so, but they're only able to do so if we're locked into a 3-year contract that we can't get out of. So that would be my 2 cents. If those are our two choices, enter into a 3-year contract, hoping that they provide the speeds that they promise, or going out for bid, I would say go out for bid.
Okay, and Councilmember Wiesner, just to let you know, when we went out for bid last time, we had some initial meetings, staff had some initial meetings with some of the potential providers, but at the end of that process, we only had one that submitted a proposal. So just as a heads up of the potential of what we may be facing as well. But I just wanted to give you that information.
Understood. Appreciate that.
Okay, we have Councilor Servadius.
Thank you, Mayor. Sabrina, looking at your slide there as IT manager, do you know, and this was before your time, I know, so we had some outstanding issues with Frontier as far as some fiber mapping and a lot of the deliverables when we did the phone conversion that Adrian and at that time Interpreting Tech needed. Do you know, did we ever get that resolved to ours and Interpreting Tech? I know they've merged with another company now, to their satisfaction?
So recently we did an audit of the services at the school district and whether or not they were split, and we identified that they had not been completely split. So we are working through those final pieces, but some of the other components of it we did resolve, and I have been working on that for several months now since I officially took over IT, and making sure that we, there was also some discrepancies about payments, and we've resolved the payment portion. But the splitting and the fiber mapping is something we are still working through, but we needed to validate that because of the company change from Frontier to Ziply. There were some record-keeping items that didn't track specifically what happened. So Jeff Kelly, one of our technicians, went out to the school district and verified that that split had not occurred. So we're working on steps and additional meetings with Ziply to resolve that.
Okay, so my experience mimics very much Councilmember Wiesner's, having sat through all of those meetings, been involved when we're doing that transition from the school district to our own or to a new fiber provider and a new phone system. There was, I'll phrase it in my words only, a lot of what I perceived as bait and switch that even culminated in one meeting where their entire team walked out of the meeting. And so I would be very hesitant. I know there hasn't traditionally been a lot of competition in Oak Harbor in this space, but I think from what I hear with the Hillside development, there might be some other providers and other options, as well as what we're doing with Anacortes. I know that'll take some time to come to fruition, but hopefully that fiber line through the water line, if that comes to fruition, would also provide us with more options. So, you know, 3 years isn't necessarily a long time, but I would be, you know, I could see 12 months or 24 months while we dig into this space and do some research, but I'm hesitant to go much further out than that based on my experience. Thank you.
No, I appreciate that, Councilmember Servadius, and that is exactly why I brought this forward to City Council so that you could look at the information and review it for yourself and provide feedback.
Thank you, Councilor Servadius. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate it. Sabrina, the last time we went out for bids, we had a crunch time because the school district said, we want it separated by this date. And it was a really short timeline. Seemed to have a lot of interest from companies, but when they found out what the timeline was that we needed, they said, we can't promise to get this done, and Frontier said they could. I am really leery with Frontier, anything connected with it, the company that just bought them out, because it doesn't seem that they have delivered much, if anything, on time. And we already have fiber that goes into City Hall and different places, and that should give us higher speed, but I guess they never connected it or made it work. So unless you can modify and write a contract where we could get out of it, which would save us some time on getting that new speed, I would say we've got to go out and investigate others, because it has been frustrating and disappointing, and I don't even have to work in City Hall all the time. So I know there's been a lot of outages and all kinds of stuff. So I would be very leery. And if we can't cross up and modify a contract to what we need, then no way. So thank you for your work.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Councilor Mack.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And I'll sound like a broken record here with the rest of the council. And yes, being a commercial property owner of a couple different buildings and having Frontier both in the commercial property and in the residential, it was great to get out of that company contracts, the billing process. And yes, I agree. Our city hall needs more speed. Don't take that the wrong way. But I would prefer to go out to bid process. It took me a good couple years, but I finally got high-speed internet to all the buildings, and is no problems whatsoever. It's been a joy to have high-speed internet and lots of speed. So yes, it takes a while, but I would not be in favor of signing any 2 to 3 year contract with Frontier or Ziply at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Mack. Councilor Goebel.
Fat fingers. Thank you, council member, or thank you, Mayor Severance. I was curious because I wasn't here when we separated from the school district, but what does the school district use at the moment?
You know, I do not know that off the top of my head. I apologize. That's not a piece of information that I have.
The reason why I ask is it would be interesting to know what they use. I work in the schools and the internet is fantastic. And you can run, you know, multiple machines at the same time. I have multiple students on a Chromebook at the same time. I rarely ever have issues with internet. So it would be interesting to know what they do, because whatever their system is, it's working quite well.
That's okay. Thank you very much. Councilor Servadius.
Thank you. Just to chime in from Ms. Goebel, they run off of, it's called the K-12 Internet Access Program or something. So it's for education, and I do believe it runs on a Frontier backbone. And it was always interesting that we were able to share that, but after going through those discussions with the school district, I guess if they have excess capacity, normally that K-12 network is only available for education, but I guess there is a stipulation that they could sell excess capacity. And I think it did run or does run on a Frontier, which should now be a Ziply backbone to answer that.
Thank you, Councilor Mercedes. Yeah, I would say based off of that information, you know, I don't think there's anything more frustrating than thinking you're signing up for a premier service and then not having that service followed through and then trying to get out of it. I've tried to get out of my own internet service many times, and it's more frustrating to it's easier just to leave it alone. So I would say if you guys are interested in looking and finding a new contract, I fully support that. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Goebel. So that looks like that concludes our comments for that item. We'll now move on to our last item. City Administrator's report. City Administrator Blaine Oborn.
Yeah, long meeting here, and I'll try to be brief, but a long report. So I'll try to be brief on my presentation of it, though. So certainly it's my opportunity to provide this report again here with matrix and a lot of information and a wealth of information to the council to help you keep informed. And I'm here to answer any questions that you might have on any items, and you're absolutely welcome to follow up with me offline too if you want to.
Looks like they're reading the report. It's no questions at this point. So I will say, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Oborn, I'll say that parts of the report, especially the CARE stuff, was really informative, but some of the stuff is really old. I mean, we knew some of the answers back at our last city council meeting. So either can you divide it or do more of a bullet type for some of it? To, in a sense, as you say, from 267 to 500 and something, so that's what, 300 pages. That's really long. We want to be up to date and have that information, and I appreciate all the work you've done to it. I'm sure that Lisa and Julie and Sabrina had a lot also to put into it.
Oh, absolutely.
But it's just, it's as long as our whole packet. No offense, but I guess in years past, I have liked it when we've gotten, each meeting, we've gotten a bullet at it. And if there were more questions, then we could ask follow-up or get more follow-up information. But to have 300 some pages for a report, and a lot of it, we already heard the answers at the first meeting in March, because some of it was from February. So I know you're trying to be ultra thorough, but it's a lot. I think somehow it can be shortened. And I think you would like it, and I think your staff that works for you would like it. I guess the most interesting was all the stuff with the CARES, with questions and how they found out and stuff like that. But a lot of the other, but it's just, anyway, thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate the input, and we'll continue to tweak things and try to get that right medium here. So, and trying to be consistent on the period of time that we're covering, and so that just to make it compatible to other items on the agenda, on the in the packet, in the information there is why we're trying to focus everything on the previous month, on February. So this is kind of the February's report. So I know I tried to be a little bit more current in the past, and it always is outdated. That's one of the challenges. Things change as we go along here, so it's been a real challenge. So certainly appreciate your input.
Okay, seeing no other questions, and at this time, anything from council? In conclusion, not seeing anything, I just want to thank you. It was a long workshop, but yet several very important topics. Thank you for your time and your work. I know that it takes a lot of time to get through this information, and we certainly appreciate it. And thanks to the public out there that are watching and giving us your input also. Be safe. Remember the 3 W's for the COVID. Make sure and wash your hands and wear your mask and watch your distance. So with that, we'll adjourn this meeting, and thanks again.